know when we're
Okay, we're on broadcast.
Hello everyone. Okay, I think we're live. Yes, hello everyone. We are really happy to have you here. This is Dario, Mihadina, and I presenting our webinar on SRHR. This is the final event for the SRHR Day Awareness Campaign. Today we have Mihadina with us, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. She is a medical doctor from Poland, and she is the former SCORA D and LRA of FMSA. And we are very happy to have her here, and looking forward to your contributions to the webinar.
All right. Thank you so much, Fidan, for the presentation. And thank you, everyone who is joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I feel very honored to be here kind of summarizing the SRHR awareness campaign. But yeah, let's get it started. So I prepared for you the set of slides. Just bear with me. I'm gonna share the screen with you now. Okay. Let me just present. Going to the beginning. Okay. All right. So I was tasked with a very, very difficult question, because I was asked why medical students should talk about SRHR. It is difficult because I would need to spend like 2 months or my entire professional career, which hopefully I'm gonna do, to talk about why is it important for medical students to talk about it. But let me just unpack it step by step. First of all, great congratulations, guys, to Dario, Egle, and Fidan for your great work on the campaign. I know how busy it can be and how difficult it is to engage, but you guys did an amazing job. And what I wanted to point out, oh, it's just gonna keep on popping up. What I wanted to point out is the list of the enrolled activities within NMOs is really, really impressive. I remember how we started with very limited, relatively limited activities, and now it's growing so well. And I just wanted to say that I'm really, really proud, just really, really proud of that. So let me just present to you the questions that I prepared for you that hopefully we will be able to answer during our 15-20 minutes webinar. So what is SRHR? There are so many abbreviations with sexual and reproductive health, reproductive rights, sexual health, maternal health. Sorry, it's just gonna keep on popping up. I'm just gonna ignore it. So I just want to say what is the current situation to ask for now. But in order for us to talk about what it is today, I want to also kind of take a step by step of how did it happen. So a little bit of historical background on the on how this definition happened. Then I want us to address the main question of this webinar. So why medical students should bother about SRHR? So why are we even here? And the question that I was asking when I was a SCORA director many times is why it is not only the SCORA issue. So why whole IFMSA should target it, and why it is actually targeting it already, but perhaps other standing committees should be just more convinced that they are also working on sexual and reproductive health and rights. So what is this magical abbreviation? So SRHR stands for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. And I remember, and some of you also can remember the times which SCORA was not Standing Committee on Sexual and Reproductive Health, but it was Standing Committee on Reproductive Health and AIDS. So even during my times, and I will not tell you when I started in IFMSA, but during my times, the reproductive health was the term that was internationally recognized. Right now, the sexual part has been added just because gradually, progressively, step by step, and the sexual rights with which many member states, which is countries and international communities, still have problems to recognize. Recently, and I wanted to, if there is one publication that was published last year in 2018 that you guys should go to as SCORA members, it is the Guttmacher-Lancet Commission report on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And this is a very first report and very first publication that is defining what sexual and reproductive health and rights are, providing a comprehensive definition of all of these key elements and why we cannot advance health without advancing rights. And here is a quote from this publication. That sexual and reproductive health is a state of physical, emotional, mental, social well-being in relation to all aspects of sexuality and reproduction, not merely the absence of disease, dysfunction, and infirmity. And it relates to the current definition of health according to WHO. It adds to this that therefore a positive approach to sexuality and reproduction should recognize the part played by pleasurable sexual relationship, trust, and communication in promoting self-esteem and overall well-being. So we see that it also recognizes sex as a pleasurable experience, which is also a very new thing in terms of if you consider the global policies. And all individuals have a right to make decisions governing their bodies and to access services that support that right. So a full recognition of the rights and how health services should be rights-based. This report also came up with the essential package of sexual and reproductive health interventions, which is the package of interventions that member states, so countries, should be targeting through their strategies. So you see a very familiar interventions. Some of them are not that obvious for member states or international community. Comprehensive sexuality education, which IFMSA is very fiercely advocating for. Counseling and services for a range of modern contraceptives with defined minimum numbers and type of methods. Antenatal, childbirth, postnatal care, including emergency obstetric and newborn care, safe abortion services, prevention and treatment of HIV and other STIs, prevention, detection and immediate services and referrals in case of sexual and gender-based violence, prevention, detection, management of reproductive cancers, especially cervical cancer, which is very vocal internationally, and a lot of actions are being done on cervical cancer. Then information counseling and services for subfertility, infertility, sexual health, and well-being. So it's a very, very comprehensive list. I know that your campaign this year, the SRHR Awareness Campaign, addressed almost all of them. But it is important to have this approach that whatever is on sexual and reproductive health is actually a comprehensive package of several different interventions, from maternal health to sexual health to education interventions for training of providers. So it's a long list and a lot of things to do. I wanted to move smoothly on. This is the situation now, and as I've been mentioning multiple times, it's not an optimal situation because this is still something that we're aiming for. It's still not a thing that is happening, and I want to walk you through on how do we come up with sexual and reproductive health and rights definition as for today. So back in, and I don't want to go to ancient Egypt, but I just wanted to us to focus on what happened in the last century. So when all of the if we can track back the conversation, it was merely sexual and reproductive health was a domain of demographers, so the people who have been taking academic considerations around population health. So by 1960, first world population conference happened in 1954, and it was happening every 10 years. So by 1960, the main concern was increasing population, this Malthusian theory of scarcity of resources, that if the global population will be growing, then there will be limited amount of resources. Therefore, there needs to be action taken in order to address the increasing population needs. Also, by 1960, this population control was actually technologically possible, because first contraceptive pills have been introduced commercially to the market, and condoms have been more and more available. So that was the 1960s. Moving on to 1970s and 80s, still the discourse on population control were dominant. However, there was also increasing discourse on rights with the new UN Tehran Declaration on Rights. So discourse on choosing if and when to have children as a basic human right. And this is a very interesting time because of the introduction of one-child policy in China, which also implied a lot of coercion. So it was clear that the choice of having children is a basic human right. And what type of coercion are we experiencing with this very restrictive and very radical new policies that have been introduced? Then the big date, and I think that many of you are aware of this because this has been considered as a major capstone of population and development and reproductive health per se, which is International Conference on Population and Development that happened in 1994 in Cairo. And why it was exceptional, it's because it was the first time that reproductive health was defined in an international policy document. So the definitions, if you Google reproductive health, the first definition that is popping up might be probably coming from the document, the program of action that has been launched by 179 countries that were present in this conference. It was the first time when world leaders agreed to invest in the rights and choice of individual men and women rather than national demographic, this population targets that I've been talking to you about. And there have been this 20-year program of action. And actually this year, we're going to be celebrating the ICPD, again, yet another abbreviation, ICPD plus 25, because it's 25 years after this conference happened. This, as I said at the beginning, this is a very important event that happened back in 1994 that set the stage for development around reproductive health. Then a year later in Beijing in China, there was a 4th Women International Conference. And during this conference, as a mirror for ICPD, there was a Beijing platform of action launched that focused more on women's rights and gender equality. Here are some quotes from this particular platform of action. So the right of all women to control all aspects of their health, in particular their fertility, is basic to their empowerment. And an equal relationship between women and men in matters of sexual relations and reproduction, including full respect for the integrity of a person, require mutual respect, consent, and shared responsibility for sexual behavior and its consequences. And as almost 25 years later, these statements are not raising brows anymore. Back then, it has been, as the quote says here, the most progressive blueprint ever for advancing women's rights. And what I want to say as well is that IFMSA is contributing to the developments of this platform of action, because every year IFMSA is sending delegation to the Commission on Status of Women, CSW, which is basically a follow-up of and kind of a chance for recommitment for the for this particular platform of action, so focused more on gender equality. Then the year 2000, the famous Millennium Development Goals. So in year 2000, there was a Millennium Development Summit in which countries gathered together to set eight Millennium Development Goals. It was pretty much a vertical process. There was no civil society consultations as it is today. It was more really top-down process, and the goal that is except from the MDG 3, which targets promoting gender equality and women empowerment, the goal that I wanted to target in this conversation is MDG 5, because if you look at 5A, which is reduction of the maternal mortality ratio, then that was the initial goal, and the 5B, the universal access to reproductive health, was only added in 2008 when the community realized that there is no maternal health without family planning and reproductive health, and therefore an indicator needs to be introduced to monitor the commitment to reproductive health. So what I want to say is that MDGs were not achieved, and therefore another commitment, the other commitment program was needed. Moving smoothly to Sustainable Development Goals that came with the Sustainable Development Summit in 2015. That is a set of 17 goals, moving from 8 goals to 17 goals that are much more broader, showing interconnections in between all of them, and looking at the bigger picture. This process was also different because of much more inclusivity of civil society and NGOs and international experts. So IFMSA as well have been participating in the consultations on the way that paved the way for the Sustainable Development Goals. The one that interests us the most is the SDG 3, and you can see that probably the advocacy that IFMSA is taking is talking about the SDG 3 because it's the goal that targets the good health and well-being. The goal that as sexual and reproductive health geeks interest us is the goal 3.7, which says that by 2030 we want to ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive healthcare services, including for family planning, information, and education, and the integration of reproductive health into strategies and programs. And people have started being very, very stressed about it because we are in 2019. 2019, we have 11 years left, and the indicators that are aimed to monitor this process have been showing that the progress is still not enough. So there is an interesting question on how we are going to achieve this very ambitious goal. The other goal that I think is also building up on the ICPD, the International Conference on Population Development, and Beijing Platform of Action, that's the SDG goal 5, the point 5.6, which is to ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. And I want to add here that look how sexual rights have been excluded from this conversation. So these rights and this health, as agreed in accordance to Program of Action of ICPD and Beijing Platform of Action. So it's kind of a reaffirmation of these platforms that started in 1994 and 1995. But it has been put into a global, Sustainable Development Goals, the program that is a program for the planet, extremely ambitious agenda, and it's very exciting to live in the times in which these goals are being taken as goals. But I'm very curious as a scientist and as a doctor on how it's going to actually happen. Another 4 policies and processes that I want to really touch base, being mindful of time, is the Mexico City policy that is commonly known as Global Gag Rule. This is a United States executive branch policy that have been first imposed by President Reagan in 1994. 1984, and has been reinstated ever since when Republican president has been elected into office. And this policy, why is it important to talk about when we are addressing SRHR, is because US has been one of the major donors to the international health and global health community. And this Mexico City policy denies organizations who receive US federal funding the rights to use their own funds to provide services, referral, or information relating to legal abortion. So this is also a policy that actually influences how programmatic actions can be taken, because none of the funds can actually go into abortion work. And we know that access to safe abortion is a sexual and reproductive health and rights. I hope that I don't need to tell that in this community, but just wanted to mark this. As I said before, this year is going to be very exciting, because in Nairobi in November later this year, there's going to be a Nairobi summit on ICPD plus 25, so accelerating and revisiting the promises that have been made in 1994 in Cairo. Another very interesting platform is Family Planning 2020, and it is a space which started by the London Summit in 2012, in which the global leaders have met to talk about the future of family planning and the commitment to reach 120 more million women in the world's poorest countries with access to contraceptives. Oh, there's a little lack of letter here. Contraceptives by 2020. And this is very interesting because we are coming back. The deadline is approaching, 2020 is approaching, and these goals seems not to be achieved yet. So next year is going to be very interesting, especially for those of you who are interested in family planning. I would encourage you to track this process because next year is going to be interesting in terms of addressing what's going to happen after 2020. And the last but not least, the very recent new WHO Global Program of Work for the years to until 2023, which sets up the triple billion target. So we are not focusing on proportion, but on numbers, which is also very interesting. But with the new WHO Global Program of Work, there are the 3 billion more people achieved by advancing universal health coverage, UHC, 1 other billion to be addressed in terms of the health emergencies that are happening, and 1 more billion addressed by promoting healthier populations. So these are the 4 processes and policies that I wanted to talk to you about as a comprehensive ending of talking about SRHR history. So the question why we met today. So why medical students should be sensitized and trained in sexual and reproductive health and rights. I want to use here the system of cheesy quotes, and you can laugh about it, but we are full of cheesy quotes. There are a lot of buzzwords that have been used, and they are very right majority of the time. But I want us a little bit to unpack what these cheesy quotes actually mean. And I wanted to start with the first one, which really resonates every time IFMSA is in the room, and it's great because medical students of today are the medical doctors of tomorrow. Very ambitious, and it sounds scary, especially for those of you who are in their final years. But it's true. Transition of being a doctor is not easy, but the deadlines are approaching very soon, sooner than you think. So what I want to say by addressing this particular issue is that we are going to be doctors. Or we are doctors or junior doctors. So the way we are being trained as medical doctors, as medical students, will imply what kind of doctors are we going to be. So if we have bias training or fragmentary training. In Poland, for instance, we have not been taught how to perform termination of pregnancy or how to use modern contraceptive methods. And many of the colleagues, as the research that we have done says, have not been taught explicitly on how to provide counseling, how to provide modern contraceptive services. So if we have biased professors, we would have biased providers. So I believe that here is the huge potential for IFMSA. So no pressure to you guys, but a huge potential for you to break this cycle and be this kind of positive disruptors and people who will set the trends of non-judgmental services. And when you guys would be professors or working within academia, you can actually have, if not now, but moving up in your career, you can actually have a real influence on what is being taught to medical students. So why is it important to talk about it now? Because we want to be trained and we want to train the new trainers, and which IFMSA is very good at, and also have the providers that would provide the non-judgmental, non-stigmatizing services. And why is it not only SCORA issue? I have been always laughing because when I was a SCORA director, that's going to be very nostalgic memory, but when I was a SCORA director, it was always, oh, it's just you guys, you SCORA, people who are talking about sex all the time. And which is partially true, but there are interconnections between the standing committees, and I wanted to showcase just a very kind of from the top of my head list, starting with, and you know, we have been having the joint session, so it has been emphasized that it's not only SCORA issue to talk about sexual and reproductive health, but other standing committees as well. So, for instance, SCOF. Sexual and reproductive health is public health, and it is just a very specific part of public health issues that have been fragmented just because they need. There is a need of special addressing of sexual and reproductive health and rights because it's not obvious, as I said, to reach consensus for the global community, let alone for IFMSA, which is reflecting how diverse global arena is. So SCOF has a lot of connections with SCORA, talking about cervical cancers, talking about NCDs. So I think that this is pretty clear connection. Then SCORP and the rights part of sexual and reproductive health and rights, and SCORP and SCORA have been close together working on the rights-based approach to health. I just added here the examples of the criminalization of sex work or LGBTQI plus issues. So that would be SCORP. In terms of SCOMI, as I said, if we have biased training, we're going to have biased providers. That is why it is also important to add sexual and reproductive health and rights as a cohesive part of medical school curricula all over the place. And scope in SCORI as well play a big role because there is a need of this culturally sensitive exchange experience and need for respecting rights to the of countries, and to be aware of being a representative of the country when you're coming for the professional or research exchange. So I hope that you're convinced now, all of the people that are joining this webinar that are not necessarily working only for SCORA, that there is a need of interconnections. And this is actually referring to my next cheesy quote number 2, which is breaking the silos. That is a term that has been used widely within the global health policies, that we are being siloed, we are being fragmented. We are talking in one room only about sexual and reproductive health, and in other room only about human rights. But as the quote from here, I put the quote from Dr. Anita Mackins, who is working for FIGO, which is International Federation of Gynecology and Obstetrics, and she rightfully said that integrating sexual and reproductive health and rights into universal health coverage is the surest way of making it truly universal and honestly sustainable. So this mindset of that having it on the back of your head that everything is so interconnected, and talking about one thing only without having this step back and having a bigger picture, having in mind bigger picture, is just basically pointless. This era is all gone. The silos are all gone. So break the silos, smash the silos, and if we hear the silos, this is what it means. Another cheesy quote that I personally love a lot, but nothing about us without us. And IFMSA has been champions, and chapeau bas to everyone who is doing policy work or global presence of IFMSA. It's a huge work. IFMSA is being pioneers in the showing how the meaningful youth engagement in global spaces can be done. And here is a huge potential of making sure that whoever is representing IFMSA in the global spaces know how to put sexual and reproductive health and rights into statements, into conversations, bringing it up as a cohesive part of IFMSA external policy. The meaningful youth engagement term, recently we have the global consensus of meaningful youth engagement, Youth 2030 strategy. So with this cheesy quote, I just wanted to say that IFMSA is doing great in terms of external representation. Please keep on doing this. You guys are fantastic. I still, when I'm looking in my past, I still have no idea how we had this kind of energy and passion to do so. But whatever you guys are doing, please keep on doing this, because putting SRHR on the table is never easy, but it's not only one LRA that can do it. So if you're passionate about it, reach to your SCORA team and reach to your liaison officers. There's a lot of work to do, so I'm sure that there's going to be work for you if you're passionate about it. Then the last cheesy quote, I promise, but think global, act local. The thing that we've been, and back in my times, we've been laughing about that. Oh, everybody's talking about think global, act local, ha ha ha. But it's true. It's really true. How and IFMSA is a fantastic example of connecting medical students from all around the world. So things that are being brought to the table by general assemblies or regional meetings, using these platforms of exchanging ideas, creating global momentum, and bringing it back into your communities and actually doing the work on the ground is what the global organization like IFMSA and other youth organizations are all about. So giving back the national or local perspective to the global level and thinking global but acting local, because nothing is going to change if we will not bring the global perspective to the local level. And also, you know, all of the international agencies like WHO right now, with Dr. Tedros as a Director General, there's a huge movement of actually empowering the countries and like putting a lot of power on what the countries are doing. Again, thinking global, having all of these policies, these platforms that I mentioned to you in already a long time, and bringing them actually to the ground, to where you're from, to your medical schools, to your communities, local committees, and national member organizations. So I will stop here, and I will give back the voice, the floor back to Fidan and Dario. But I wanted to say thank you. And if you have any questions, I am still at IFMSA SCORA Facebook group, or you can catch me wherever. I really feel that IFMSA has shaped me and in who I am now as a professional, I am just creating something. I wanted to stop sharing the screen, but I don't know how to do it. Oh, okay, now I did that. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelina, and it was very inspiring, and it was a lot of information that are very we can all relate with. And so really, thank you. It was super interesting. And so this was basically the last part of this campaign, which was composed by our profile picture frames about how SRHR can affect our daily life, because even if we probably don't even notice it, but every day we face with SRHR related issues. Also, every little part really of our daily life. So it's really important to be aware of it and to also make other people aware of it, so that we can raise awareness, which was basically the main outcome of this campaign. Also, there were the infographics, and finally this webinar. And so this is basically your moment, because if you have any question for Michelina or about the campaign, about everything you want, you can do that. You can write the question on the chat as a comment in the YouTube page, and we will see that and we will answer live. So if you have something, please write. We're gonna wait for a bit, and yes, this is it.
Misha, I wanted to thank you too. This was a wonderful presentation that you gave. I've had the chance to listen to you before, and every time you wow us. And I hope that this was helpful for our members, for everyone listening. And I really like the part that you mentioned that think globally, act locally, and it's especially, I know it's a cheesy quote, but it affects. It's so important when it comes to SRHR, because we all have such varying needs. And I know about your work regarding SRHR in Poland, and I remember your photos from your graduation. I remember a lot of stuff that you've done, and it matters so much, and we can do so much for our local community as well, also contributing to the global scale. So I loved it. I'm going to use this presentation as an inspiration for my own future work too. And thank you again for being here with us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and I was by this presentation, I really wanted to also set up the stage, because it's sometimes, especially if someone comes to IFMSA and seeing SCORA, except just sharing that it's probably the best standing committee in IFMSA, but I might be biased, and I'm very very conscious about my bias. But I think that the moment you're jumping in to this world, the sexual and reproductive health world, it really depends where is your interest coming from. Many of the students that are coming are, oh, I want to be obstetrician and gynecologist, and this is the closest that I can do. Some people have clear career goals, like, oh, I want to work in sexual and reproductive health, or I want to be infectious disease doctor, and I want to address STIs. So it really depends where you're coming from. And then all of this beauty during SCORA sessions or whatever meeting is happening, that everyone is just broadening their minds. But it's difficult to just jump in and know everything. I know that it took me a long time to kind of, oh, so why are we talking about this? Why are we not talking about SRHR, but we are talking about reproductive rights? Why several countries still have problems with sexual rights, with using this term within their policies, and where is it coming from? It's very interesting, because we, during medical school, if you are not in a public health domain, it's such a new concept. It's a very complicated one. So it's also a privilege. I consider it that, like, not many people have the access to this information of how policies are made. It's a yet another career. So how IFMSA is doing policy together with medicine, chapeau bas. People are absolutely amazing, and I think that it's very. For me, it's an honor to say that I was in IFMSA, because IFMSA has built me who I am today. But most importantly, it is still growing, and I encourage you, because, as I told you, like, deadlines are coming, and people are growing up and being a doctor. But with coming back on what you said, thinking global, acting local, whenever you have a chance to give back in whatever ways possible, do it, because that's also meaningful youth engagement. And you know, I still have 2 years of being young, but then after 30, when my collagen will stop working, well, you know, we're gonna outgrow of this movement. So I also wanted to kind of put my 2 cents on the table, that whenever you guys have a chance to mentor or like give back to your local communities, please do so. I don't know whether there are any questions. I'm very, very curious whether it was like useful, or if any of you guys have any questions.
Okay, so far we didn't receive any question, but we actually received some cheerings, I guess that's the word, about our standing committee. So we have some fans, which is great. And so I don't know, we don't have any question to answer, which is not really surprising because you did great and you said a lot of things actually, so I'm not really surprised by this. And so I guess this is the end of the webinar, but I want to remember everyone that this will also be available afterwards as a normal YouTube video, and we will be sharing it. Soon with you, together with a recap of all the campaign we did, so that you can see this whenever you want, whenever you need, and also ask us, reach us in any way you want. We will be sharing our contacts so that you can ask us whatever you want, whenever you want. So thank you for watching, and thank you again, Michalina, really a lot.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.